The stale beer and cigarette smoke clung to Leo Maxwell like a second skin. He adjusted the ill-fitting security uniform, the polyester scratching against the faded tattoo of a treble clef on his forearm. Not exactly the life he envisioned when he left the force, but it paid the bills, barely. The Harmony Blues Festival wasn't glamorous work, mostly ensuring teenagers didn't scale the perimeter fence and occasionally breaking up minor scuffles. Still, it was a far cry from the darkness he used to navigate. He hadn't intended to end up a gatekeeper for aging rockers and hopefuls. The stage pulsed with the electric lament of Jackson, Jack's bellwether, a prodigy carrying the torch of the Delta Blues. Leo leaned against a chain link fence, the bass drum thrumming in his chest, more a dull ache than a rhythm. He'd once felt a similar thrum, but that was the adrenaline of a chase, the certainty of purpose. Now it was just emptiness. 5 years. 5 years since the DeMarco case had cracked him open, spilling everything good onto the dusty asphalt of a forgotten parking lot. 5 years of feeling like a ghost in his own life. He'd left the Chicago PD with a forced early retirement, a bottle of single malt for company, and a whole lot of regret. He scanned the crowd, his gaze lingering on the faces bathed in the stage lights. A sea of denim and worn leather, the scent of patchouli mixing with the aforementioned beer and smoke. The harvest moon hung fat and low, casting long shadows across the festival grounds. Everything felt normal, too normal. Then the yelling started. Not a drunken brawl, not teenage exuberance. This was sharper, laced with panic. It came from the VIP tent, a cavern of black canvas tucked behind the stage. Leo pushed off the fence, his muscles remembering the automatic response, the quickening of senses. He started moving before the security radio crackled to life. Security to VIP tent. We've got a problem. He cut through the crowd, ignoring the annoyed grumbles. Just another lost phone, he figured. Or maybe Jack's bellwether had finally snapped at a heckler. As he neared the tent, he saw 2 uniformed officers already trying to force their way through the throng of concerned roadies and anxious festival staff. "What is going on?" Leo asked, flashing a faded card he rarely used anymore. "Guitar's gone." Officer Davies, a fresh-faced rookie he vaguely remembered from the academy, said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Bellwether's guitar. The Gibson." Leo felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Not just any Gibson. The Gibson, Blind Willie Johnson. S1930s Gibson, on loan for the festival from a private collector. A piece of musical history, an insured, for millions piece of musical history. He shouldered his way into the tent. It was a lavish space, plush carpets and velvet ropes meant to provide comfort for the music elite. Right now, it was a scene of controlled chaos. Marlene Hayes, the festival's steely-eyed organizer, was pacing like a caged tiger, barking orders into a cell phone. Jack's bellwether stood frozen near the stage, his face ashen. The guitar stand was empty. The case, a worn black hardshell, lay open on the floor. "Leo," Marlene Hayes said, spotting him. Her voice was brittle. "Thank God, find it. Now, do you hear me? Now, this is a disaster, a complete disaster. Marlene, calm down. We'll find it." Leo kept his voice level, projecting an authority he didn't feel. "What is the story? Was the tent guarded?" Of course, it was guarded. 2 of my best people. They stepped out for 5 minutes, 5 minutes, to deal with a medical issue. Some old lady fainted. When they came back, gone. She ran a hand through her perfectly coiffed hair. "This isn't just a theft, Leo. This is a PR nightmare. Sponsors will pull out. Attendance will plummet. Everything I've built." Leo knelt beside the open case, his eyes scanning the interior. The plush lining was undisturbed, a faint scent of lemon polish lingering in the air. No forced entry, no obvious signs of a struggle. He ran a hand along the inside of the case. Anything taken besides the guitar? Nothing, just the guitar. The guards get me their statements already on it. Marlene was snapping orders into her phone again. I want every security camera footage reviewed, every entrance and exit scrutinized. I want a full accounting of everyone who had access to this tent in the last hour. Leo straightened, his gaze sweeping across the room, taking in every detail. Something didn't feel right. It was too clean, too easy. A thief targeting a specific, incredibly valuable instrument during a high-profile event. It reeked of something more. This wasn't a smash and grab. This was orchestrated. The ghost of his detective days flickered to life, a forgotten skill, set reawakening. He hadn't felt this, engaged in years. It was unsettling and oddly exhilarating. Davies, he said to the rookie. Seal off the tent. Nobody in, nobody out. I want a list of everyone who was in the VIP area in the last hour, including staff and guests. Every name, every contact number. As Davies hurried off to follow orders, Leo felt a familiar itch building beneath his skin. A restless energy that demanded to be channeled. The need to know. He needed to shut down the noise, to focus. The pressure from Marlene was suffocating. The stakes impossibly high. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a prelude to the anxiety that had plagued him since leaving the force. He needed something to dull the edge. An hour later, Leo found himself in a dimly lit corner of the festival's beer garden, a lukewarm bottle of domestic beer in his hand. He wasn't really tasting it. His mind was replaying the scene in the VIP tent, piecing together fragments of information, the lack of forced entry, the precise timing, the sheer audacity of the theft. He'd reviewed the security footage. Nothing. The cameras covering the tent's entrances and exits showed nothing unusual. A steady flow of people, but no one suspicious, no one carrying a guitar case. He'd interviewed the guards, 2 young students earning extra money. They were shaken, but their story checked out. The medical emergency was legitimate. An elderly woman, dehydrated and lightheaded. They'd alerted festival medical personnel and been briefly distracted, enough time for someone to slip in and out unnoticed. He took a long pull from the beer, the liquid doing little to soothe the gnawing anxiety. The weight of the case was starting to feel familiar. It reminded him of the DeMarco investigation, the meticulously planned operation, the layers of deception. He glanced at his watch. He should be back at the main security station, overseeing the perimeter, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was being overlooked. He needed to think. He needed to feel the case the way he used to. He fished a crumpled betting slip from his pocket, a long shot on a late-night horse race. He told himself it was just a way to pass the time, a distraction, but he knew better. It was a compulsion, a way to feel something, anything, other than the dull ache of regret. The digital display on the slip flickered, numbers scrolling across the screen. Another race, another chance to chase the illusion of control. He almost placed another bet, his finger hovering over the submit button. Then he remembered the guitar case. Something about it had bothered him, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. He forced himself to focus, to recall every detail of the scene, the plush lining, the lemon Polish scent, and something else. A faint discoloration on the inside of the case lid. He excused himself, pushing past Laughing Festival. Goers, heading back toward the VIP tent. He needed to see the case again. The tent was still sealed off, Davies guarding the entrance. Leo flashed his ID and stepped inside. The case was exactly where he'd left it, lying open on the floor. He knelt beside it, ignoring Davies' curious gaze. He ran his fingers along the inside of the lid, feeling for anything unusual. There it was. A series of faint scratches, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. He angled the case toward the light, his heart beginning to pound. They weren't random scratches, they were deliberate, a pattern. He pulled out his phone, activating the camera and taking a close-up photo of the markings. He enlarged the image, his eyes scanning the pattern. It wasn't a language he recognized. It wasn't musical notation. It was a code. A cold dread washed over him. He recognized the style. He'd seen it before, years ago. During his time with the Chicago PD, he frantically searched his memory, digging through the dusty archives of his past. Then it hit him, the Hastings case. Old man Hastings, a reclusive antique collector, found murdered in his locked study. The case had gone cold, unsolved. The only clue had been a series of coded messages found hidden in Hastings' collection. The lead detective, a grizzled veteran named Kalinsky, had spent months trying to decipher them, but ultimately failed. Leo had been a young detective then, assigned to the case. He remembered poring over the files, studying the symbols, feeling the weight of the unsolved mystery. He'd almost forgotten about it. Almost. He quickly searched his phone, navigating to a cloud storage folder containing scanned copies of old case files. He found the Hastings file, the images grainy and faded. He compared the symbols from the guitar case to the ones in the file. They were identical. A wave of dizziness washed over him. This wasn't just a guitar theft. This was something much, much bigger. Something that reached back into his past, into a case he thought long buried. He stared at the photo on his phone, the coded message staring back at him. A message that promised to unravel everything he thought he knew. A message that brought the darkness rushing back, threatening to consume him once more. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Marlene Hayes, her voice shrill with panic. "Leo, I just got off the phone with the insurance company. They're sending investigators. And the press is here, everywhere. They're asking questions. What have you got? Anything?" Leo swallowed hard, the weight of the strings pressing down on him. "Marlene," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I think this is connected to a cold case." The fluorescent lights of his cramped apartment hummed a discordant tune, mirroring the chaos in Leo's head. Pizza boxes littered the coffee table, casualties of a sleepless night fueled by lukewarm coffee and mounting dread. The photo of the code, taken from the guitar case, was projected onto the wall, magnified to a disturbing size. He'd spent the last 6 hours hunched over his laptop, cross-referencing the symbols with every cipher he could find. Finally, a breakthrough. It wasn't a complex code, just a simple substitution cipher, rotating letters based on a numerical key. The Hastings case files hadn't. T cracked it because the key itself was hidden, Thundine woven into the lyrics of a little-known Savannah Reed song, "Dust Devil, Es Lament." Savannah Reed. The name echoed like a ghost from his past. A promising blues singer, found dead in her Chicago apartment in 1998. The case had been messy, politically charged, and ultimately unsolved. He remembered the whispers among the officers, the rumors of powerful men involved, the swift decision to shelve the investigation. He typed the decoded message into a text editor. The words swam before his eyes, chillingly concise. "The melody holds the key. Calhoun knows. Calhoun Jasper. Jas Calhoun." A name that surfaced repeatedly in the old files. A collector of blues memorabilia, a known associate of Savannah Reed, and a man with connections to the city's underbelly. Back then, he'd been questioned briefly, but had an airtight alibi, a high-stakes poker game with several prominent and well-protected Chicago figures. Leo pulled up the original case files, digitized and stored on a secure server. The report was frustratingly thin, filled with half-hearted interviews and overlooked leads. Something had been deliberately suppressed. He scrolled through the crime scene. Photo Savannah Reed, lying amidst overturned furniture, her expression frozen in a silent scream. A single crimson rose clutched in her hand. The image seared itself into his mind. He'd been a rookie then, assigned to photograph the scene. The lead detective, a jaded veteran named Karras, had dismissed it as a crime of passion, a jealous lover. But Leo had always felt something was off. The room hadn't been ransacked. It had been staged, and the single rose felt too deliberate. Now, 25 years later, the pieces were starting to fall into place, forming a disturbing pattern. A stolen guitar, a coded message, a cold case murder, and Jazz Calhoun at the center of it all. He decided to reach out to old colleagues, hoping to glean some insight. First, Sergeant Miller, a grizzled officer who'd been with the force for over 30 years. "Leo, haven't heard from you in ages. What brings you out of the woodwork?" Tinged with suspicion. "Just doing some digging, Miller. The Harmony Festival. A guitar was stolen. Found a code on the case. Led me back to the Reed murder." A long silence followed. Then, Miller sighed. "That is a can of worms you don't want to open, Leo." "What do you mean?" "Let it go, kid. Some things are better left buried. The people involved, they weren't the type you cross. You remember what happened to Karras." Leo felt a knot tighten in his gut. Karras, the lead detective on the Reed case. He'd retired suddenly a year later, citing health reasons. But the rumors were that he'd gotten too close to the truth and been forced out. "What are you saying, Miller?" "That someone made Karras retire." "I'm saying stay out of it, Leo, for your own good." The line went dead. The call left Leo shaken. He tried another contact, Detective Reynolds, a forensic specialist who'd worked on the Reed case. Reynolds was more forthcoming, but equally vague. Savannah Reed. That was a mess. Leo. A real mess. There were things, evidence that disappeared. Things that didn't add up. I raised concerns. Officially, it was a domestic dispute. Unofficially, well, let's just say some powerful people wanted it to go away. Do you remember anything specific? Any evidence that was overlooked? Reynolds hesitated. There was a strange discrepancy with the timeline. Calhoun's alibi. It was solid, but I always had a feeling someone was lying. And there was a trace of a unique, expensive cigar smoke at the scene. Calhoun was known to smoke those cigars. But it wasn't conclusive. No, it wasn't. And in this city, not conclusive is often enough to close a case. Reynolds' words confirmed Leo's suspicions. The Reed investigation had been a sham, a carefully orchestrated cover-up, and Jazz Calhoun was somehow involved. He needed to find Calhoun. It wasn't difficult. Calhoun was a fixture in Chicago's blues scene, owning a small, dimly lit club on the south side called the Blue Note. Leo parked across the street, observing the club for an hour. It was a nondescript building, the neon sign flickering intermittently. The clientele was a mix of local musicians, shady characters, and curious tourists. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the melancholic wail of a saxophone. He spotted Calhoun sitting at the bar, nursing a glass of amber liquid. He was older than Leo remembered, his face etched with lines, but his eyes still held a predatory gleam. Leo approached the bar and ordered a beer. He sat a few stools down from Calhoun. "You Jazz Calhoun?" Keeping his voice casual. Calhoun turned, his eyes assessing Leo with a cold detachment. "That depends. Who is asking?" "Leo Maxwell. I used to be with the Chicago PD." A flicker of recognition crossed Calhoun's face, quickly masked by a carefully cultivated indifference. "A cop, huh? What can I do for you, Officer Maxwell?" "I am investigating the theft of a guitar from the Harmony Blues Festival. A 1930s Gibson. We found something interesting on the case." Interesting how Leo decided to play it coy. Just a code. A series of symbols. It led us back to the Savannah Reed case. Calhoun's hand tightened around his glass. He didn't flinch, didn't betray any emotion. But Leo sensed a shift in his demeanor. Savannah, that was a long time ago. A tragedy, of course, a beautiful voice silenced too soon. You knew her well, didn't you? We were acquaintances. I appreciated her music. She was a friend to the club. I understand you were questioned in connection with her murder. Calhoun chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Questioned? Yes, and I cooperated fully. I had an alibi, a solid one. I was with friends playing poker. I'm aware of your alibi, but there have always been questions, discrepancies. Questions are easily raised, Officer Maxwell, especially when someone is looking for a story. Calhoun took a slow sip of his drink. As for the guitar, I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't seen that guitar in years. You wouldn't happen to know anyone who would know about it, would you? Calhoun stared at Leo for a long moment, his eyes boring into his. You're digging where you shouldn't, officer. Some stones are best left unturned. Leo felt a prickle of unease. Calhoun's tone was a veiled warning. He needed to change the subject. He reached into his pocket, intending to offer to buy Calhoun a drink, to try to build some rapport. But his hand came out empty. Panic flared in his chest. He patted his other pockets, frantically searching. His wallet was gone. He'd been cleaned. He remembered feeling a slight brush against his leg earlier, while he was standing at the bar. A pickpocket, a professional. He felt a cold wave of despair wash over him. He was broke, strapped for cash even before this. Now, with the gambling debts looming and the cost of investigating this case mounting, he was sinking fast. He looked back at Calhoun, who was watching him with a subtle, knowing smile. Lost something, Officer Maxwell? Calhoun asked, his voice dripping with amusement. Perhaps you should be more careful with your belongings. A man in your position, you wouldn't want to attract the wrong kind of attention. The hollow ache in Leo's pocket was a constant reminder of his vulnerability. Losing his wallet hadn't just cost him money. It felt like a deliberate message, a demonstration of power. Calhoun hadn't directly threatened him, but the implication was clear. We're watching you. Something to counter Calhoun's influence. He started by digging into Calhoun's business dealings, tracing the labyrinthine network of shell corporations and real estate holdings. It wasn't easy. Calhoun was careful, a master of obscuring his tracks. But Leo had been a detective, and he knew how to follow the money. He discovered a pattern of shady land acquisitions, properties purchased for inflated prices from distressed owners, often in predominantly black neighborhoods. Calhoun had been systematically buying up land along the riverfront, assembling a large parcel that was ripe for development. Rumors swirled about his connections to the Valerius family, one of Chicago's oldest and most powerful crime syndicates. The Valerius family didn't get involved in legitimate businesses. They controlled them. He spent the day at the Chicago Public Library, poring over microfiche archives and digitized news articles. The Savannah Reed case barely registered in the mainstream media at the time. It was a local story, quickly overshadowed by other events. But Leo found a few scattered articles that hinted at a deeper story. Savannah was reportedly working on a song, a protest song, exposing corruption within City Hall. The target of her song, Councilman Richard "Rick" Harding, a rising political star with a reputation for ruthlessness. Harding was responsible for approving the zoning changes that allowed Calhoun to begin his land grab along the riverfront. Leo felt a surge of adrenaline. It was starting to come together. Savannah Reed hadn't been killed because of a love triangle or a jealous rival. She'd been silenced. He needed to find more evidence, something concrete that connected Calhoun and Harding to Savannah's murder. He remembered Reynolds mentioning Calhoun's vintage amplifier collection. Calhoun was a fanatic, obsessed with collecting rare and collectible guitar equipment. Maybe, just maybe, there was something hidden among those relics. He knew he couldn't just walk into the Blue Note and ask to see Calhoun's collection. He fabricated a story, posing as a potential buyer, a wealthy collector looking to expand his inventory. He contacted Calhoun through a third party, a music broker known for catering to wealthy clients. To his surprise, Calhoun agreed to a meeting. The back room of the Blue Note was a dimly lit shrine to the blues. Vintage guitars hung on the walls like museum pieces. Rows of amplifiers gleamed under the soft light. It was a collector's paradise. Calhoun, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, greeted Leo with a guarded smile. "So, you are interested in adding to your collection?" "Very interested," Leo replied, carefully maintaining his cover. He casually walked among the amplifiers, admiring the craftsmanship. His eyes scanned for anything out of place, anything that might offer a clue. He stopped in front of a particularly large, ornate amplifier, a 1950s Fender twin reverb. It looked authentic, but something felt off. He ran his hand along the back panel, noticing a slight discrepancy in the wood grain. He pressed a hidden latch, and a small compartment sprung open. Inside, nestled amongst the tubes and wires, was a collection of old photographs, black and white, faded with age. He carefully removed them, his heart pounding in his chest. The photographs depicted Savannah Reed and Jasper Calhoun together, not just as acquaintances, but as lovers. Intimate moments captured in grainy detail, laughing, embracing, performing on stage. One photograph showed them standing in front of Harding's mansion, a shared expression of defiance on their faces. He glanced up at Calhoun, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. Leo quickly concealed the photographs, stuffing them into his jacket pocket. "Beautiful pieces," he said, forcing a smile. "But I think I'll pass for now. My tastes run a bit more modern." Calhoun's eyes narrowed. "A shame. You have good taste, though." Leo excused himself, desperate to escape. He'd gotten what he needed. Evidence, concrete evidence, linking Calhoun to Savannah Reed, and potentially to her murder. Back at the festival, the atmosphere was spiraling into chaos. Marlene Hayes was on the verge of a meltdown. The media had descended like vultures, relentlessly questioning her about the stolen guitar and its alleged connection to a 25-year-old murder. "This is a disaster, Leo. A complete and utter disaster. They recalling me irresponsible. They re-questioning the security arrangements. The sponsors are threatening to pull out." "We're doing everything we can, Marlene," Leo said, trying to remain calm. "I have some leads. I'm confident we can resolve this." Confident. "This isn't a confidence game, Leo. This is my reputation on the line." Leo ignored her tirade and headed back to his apartment, eager to analyze the photographs and formulate a plan. He needed to get them to the police, to someone he could trust, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by Calhoun or his connections. He unlocked his apartment door and stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the smell, a faint, acrid odor, something metallic and stale. The apartment had been ransacked. Drawers were pulled open, clothes were strewn across the floor, books had been ripped from their shelves. Everything had been overturned, meticulously searched. It wasn't a random burglary. This was targeted. He walked cautiously through the wreckage, his senses on high alert. He checked the bedroom, his heart sinking as he surveyed the damage. The mattress had been slashed, the closet emptied, and on his pillow, amidst the chaos, lay a single object, an antique guitar pick made of mother-of-pearl, intricately carved with a small, stylized rose. It wasn't his. He didn't own any guitar picks. He recognized it instantly. It was identical to the one found clutched in Savannah Reed's hand in the crime scene photos. He picked it up, his fingers trembling. It was a calling card, a message. His phone rang, shattering the silence. He glanced at the caller, ID unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello. A distorted voice, electronically altered, spoke on the other end. You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Maxwell. Some secrets are best left buried. Consider this a friendly warning. Back off. The line went dead. Leo stared at the guitar pick in his hand, the weight of it pressing down on him. He was no longer just investigating a theft. He was treading on dangerous ground. He'd awakened a sleeping giant, and now he was paying the price. He felt a cold certainty creep into his bones. This wasn't just about a stolen guitar or a decades-old murder. It was about power, corruption, and a network of secrets that reached into the very heart of the city. And he was caught in the middle of it. He was in the devil's due. Flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of his apartment in a macabre strobe. 2 uniformed officers stood guard, their expressions grim. Marlene Hayes, looking both relieved and horrified, hovered nearby, wringing her hands. I don't understand, Leo stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He'd arrived back at his apartment moments ago to find it swarming with police. We have a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Maxwell, the lead officer, a stern-faced woman named Kowalski, said curtly. You are being charged with grand theft, possession of stolen property, and obstruction of justice. What? This is insane. I'm investigating the theft. I'm not involved. Kowalski didn't respond, simply nodding to her partner, who began reading Leo his rights. He barely listened, his mind reeling in disbelief. The planted evidence was obvious. The Gibson guitar, or a remarkably convincing replica, was discovered hidden in his kitchen, along with his wallet, conveniently recovered from a pawn shop across town. It was a perfect frame. Clean, efficient. Calhoun's fingerprints were all over it. This is a setup, Leo protested, his voice rising in desperation. Jazz Calhoun is behind this. He is trying to discredit me. Kowalski exchanged a knowing glance with Marlene Hayes. Calhoun is a respected member of the community. He is fully cooperating with the investigation. You, on the other hand. He was suspended from his security job, his access badge deactivated. Kowalski made it clear that further attempts to investigate the case would be considered obstruction of justice. He was effectively neutralized. Leo knew he couldn't trust the police. He was on his own. He slipped through the cracks in the system, leveraging old contacts and a network of favors to disappear before formal charges could be filed. He traded his apartment for a dingy motel room on the outskirts of the city, paying cash and avoiding any digital footprint. He needed help. Someone with the skills to unravel the financial web surrounding Calhoun and Harding. He remembered his father mentioning Eleanor Vance, a retired forensic accountant who'd worked with him on several complex cases. Eleanor Vance lived in a quiet, unassuming bungalow on the north side. She was a small, wiry woman with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. She listened patiently as Leo recounted his story, her expression unreadable. So, you're saying you've been framed? Yes, Calhoun is running a racket, and Savannah Reed was about to expose him. He silenced her, and now he is trying to silence me. Eleanor tapped a pen against her teeth. Sounds like you've stirred up a hornet's nest, young man, but a frame job. That suggests a level of desperation. I need you to help me trace the money. Calhoun's land acquisitions, the transactions with Harding. I need to prove he is corrupt. Eleanor agreed, reluctantly. I'm retired, Leo. I don't relish getting involved in this kind of mess. But your father was a good man. I owe him a debt. For the next 2 days they worked tirelessly, poring over financial records, following the paper trail through a maze of offshore accounts and shell corporations. Eleanor was a master of her craft, uncovering hidden transactions and illicit payments with astonishing speed. They discovered a series of large, untraceable deposits made from Calhoun's accounts to Harding's personal offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The money coincided with the approval of the zoning changes along the riverfront. "It is blatant," Eleanor said, her voice grim. Harding was in Calhoun's pocket. They dug deeper, uncovering a pattern of similar payments to other city officials, all linked to Calhoun's real estate ventures. They were piecing together a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of city government. Leo, fueled by adrenaline and a burning desire for justice, decided to revisit the blue note, hoping to find more evidence. He needed proof of Calhoun's involvement with Savannah Reed, something beyond the photographs he'd already found. He remembered Calhoun mentioning a hidden storage room in the back of the club. He slipped into the club during a slow afternoon, using a fake ID and pretending to be a music journalist. He managed to distract the bartender and slip into the back room, locating the hidden storage area behind a false wall. He found it packed with dusty boxes filled with old musical equipment, vintage posters and forgotten memorabilia. He began rummaging through the boxes, his heart pounding. He found a stack of old concert flyers featuring Savannah Reed as the opening act for a renowned blues guitarist. Then, at the bottom of one of the boxes, he found a small, leather-bound diary. It was Savannah Reed's. He quickly flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning her handwritten notes. It was a chronicle of her life, her music, and her growing fears about Calhoun and Harding. She documented their corrupt dealings in detail, including dates, amounts, and names. He'd hit the jackpot. But as he closed the diary, he heard a noise, a footstep. He quickly concealed the diary and turned around. Two hulking men, Calhoun's notorious enforcers, stood blocking the doorway. They were both built like brick walls, their faces expressionless, looking for something. Officer Maxwell. The larger of the two men growled, his voice laced with menace. Leo knew he was trapped. He tried to back away, but they moved quickly, cornering him against the wall. "Calhoun sends his regards," the other enforcer said, cracking his knuckles. A brutal fight ensued. Leo, despite his training, was outnumbered and overpowered. He landed a few lucky punches, but they were quickly countered by a barrage of blows. He felt a searing pain in his ribs, a sharp crack in his jaw. He managed to break free momentarily, scrambling out of the storage room and into the main club. The bartender shouted. Patrons stared. He raced towards the exit, but the enforcers were hot on his heels. He barely made it out the door, sprinting down the street, dodging traffic. He lost them after a few blocks. Ducking into a crowded alleyway, he stumbled into the motel, bruised and battered, grateful to be alive. He called Eleanor, his voice shaky. "I found her diary. It has everything we need. But I was almost caught. They're onto me." "Get out of there, Leo. You're not safe. I'll make copies of the documents and send them to a trusted journalist. We need to get this information out there." He agreed reluctantly. He packed his meager belongings, preparing to disappear once again. He felt utterly exhausted, both physically and emotionally. He was running out of options, running out of time. He arrived at Eleanor's bungalow an hour later, hoping to find her waiting, but the front door was ajar, a chilling sign of trouble. He cautiously stepped inside, his hand reaching for the gun he'd reluctantly acquired. The house was eerily silent. He found Eleanor slumped over her desk, her face pale and lifeless. He rushed to her side, checking for a pulse. Nothing. She was gone. The paramedics arrived moments later, confirming the obvious. A massive heart attack, they said, but Leo didn't believe it. The room was too neat, too organized. There was no sign of a struggle, but something felt wrong, a deliberate stillness. He searched the room, his eyes scanning for any clues. He noticed something clutched tightly in Eleanor's hand, a small, blue object. He gently pried open her fingers. It was a guitar string. A single, blue guitar string. The same shade of blue as the one Savannah Reed used to customize her guitars. A calling card, a clear, unmistakable message. He knew with a chilling certainty that this wasn't a coincidence. Eleanor hadn't died of natural causes. She'd been silenced, just like Savannah Reed, and he was next. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of the Blue Moon Saloon, a dilapidated roadhouse 20 miles outside of Chicago. The neon sign flickered intermittently, casting an eerie glow on the muddy parking lot. It reeked of stale beer, desperation, and something else. This was Calhoun's sanctuary, a place where the law held little sway. Leo had tracked him here, following a ghost trail of anonymous tips and hushed whispers. He parked his beat-up Ford a distance away, scanning the surroundings. The club was isolated, surrounded by fields and dense woodland, perfect for a clandestine meeting, perfect for a trap. He checked the .38 revolver. He de-acquired on the black market T.D. a relic from his past. He hoped to leave behind. He hadn't fired a gun in 5 years, but the muscle memory was still there. He took a deep breath and stepped out into the rain. The club was dimly lit, sparsely populated. A handful of truckers, local farmers, and shady characters nursing their drinks. Calhoun sat at a corner table, a bottle of whiskey and a deck of cards his only companions. He didn't look surprised to see Leo. "You're a persistent one, Officer Maxwell," Calhoun said, his voice smooth as silk. "I thought I'd made myself clear." "I need to know why you killed Savannah Reed," Leo said, his voice steely. He didn't bother with pretense. Calhoun chuckled. "Killed? A rather strong accusation. Savannah's death was a tragedy, yes, but I had nothing to do with it. Don't insult my intelligence. I have the diary. I know about the payments from Harding. I know you were silencing her." Calhoun's face hardened. "The diary. You found Eleanor Vance, didn't you? A foolish woman. She should have stayed out of other people's business." A cold dread washed over Leo. Eleanor. He tried calling her several times, no answer. The pieces clicked into place. He'd been so focused on Calhoun, he hadn't considered a direct threat to those helping him. "You had her killed." Leo's voice was a low growl. "Let's just say I encouraged her to focus on her gardening. Savannah was getting too close to the truth. Harding wasn't happy. He hired me to make her disappear." "What truth?" Harding was skimming millions from city contracts, laundering the money through real estate deals. Savannah had uncovered it. She was about to go public. Harding couldn't let that happen. Calhoun took a sip of his whiskey. "I was a fixer. I cleaned up messes. It is what I do." Suddenly, the saloon doors swung open, and Councilman Richard Harding strode in, flanked by 2 burly bodyguards. He surveyed the room with a disdainful gaze. "Calhoun, what is going on here?" "Just a misunderstanding, Councilman," Calhoun replied smoothly. "Officer Maxwell here seems to think I had something to do with Savannah Reed's unfortunate demise." Harding's eyes locked onto Leo. "You're the cop who has been causing trouble. I've heard about you." He gestured to his bodyguards, who moved to flank Leo. "I have enough evidence to arrest both of you," Leo said, his hand hovering near his revolver. "For murder, fraud, conspiracy." Harding let out a booming laugh. "You're delusional, officer. You have nothing, just a lot of baseless accusations." He pulled a thick envelope from his pocket. "Here, let's make this easy. Let's forget about Savannah Reed. Forget about the land deals. I'll give you enough money to retire comfortably. Spend the rest of your days on a beach somewhere. What do you say?" Leo stared at the envelope, disgusted. You think I can be bought. You think money can erase a life. Every own has a price, officer. You just haven't found yours yet. Harding continued. Consider it a consulting fee. My price is justice, Leo said, his voice unwavering. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Harding's face contorted with rage. Get him, he snarled, gesturing to his bodyguards. The saloon erupted into chaos. Leo drew his revolver, firing a warning shot into the ceiling. The bodyguards lunged at him, but he anticipated their move, dodging their attacks and using his years of training to his advantage. A brutal, close-quarters fight broke out. Leo, outnumbered, was forced to rely on instinct and grit. He ducked under a wild swing, landing a solid punch to the bodyguard's jaw. He used the bar as cover, returning fire when necessary. Calhoun, observing the mayhem with a detached amusement, reached for a pistol hidden under the table. Leo saw the movement and fired, hitting Calhoun in the shoulder. Calhoun cried out in pain, dropping the weapon. The shootout was brief, brutal, and messy. Glasses shattered, tables overturned, patrons screamed and scrambled for cover. Leo, battered and bruised, managed to subdue Harding's bodyguards, disarming them and forcing them to the ground. Realizing he was losing control, attempted to make a run for the door. Leo intercepted him, tackling him to the floor. It is over, Harding, Leo said, pressing his knee against the councilman's chest. You're under arrest. As Leo cuffed Harding, he noticed something that didn't sit right. He'd been so focused on arresting Harding and Calhoun that he hadn't questioned the guitar itself. That was strange. Why was so much effort put into stealing the guitar? He remembered Eleanor's words, follow the money, and suddenly a damning realization hit him. The guitar wasn't the objective. It was a distraction, a meticulously crafted illusion designed to steer the investigation away from the real target, Harding's corrupt land deals. The theft was a smokescreen, a way to muddy the waters and discredit anyone who dared to dig too deep. The code in the guitar case was just another layer of misdirection. Before Leo could process this revelation, the front door burst open again. But this time, it wasn't Calhoun's henchman. It was a woman, mid-30s, elegant, impeccably dressed. She carried herself with an air of quiet authority. Well, she said, her voice a silken whisper. Looks like you've made quite a mess, Officer Maxwell. Leo recognized her instantly. He'd seen her photograph in the old Savannah Reed files. You're Olivia Reed, he said, his voice laced with astonishment. Olivia smiled. A cold, predatory expression. That is right, and you've been a very bothersome distraction. What are you doing here? Let's just say I've been managing things from the shadows, ensuring everything went to plan. She tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. Savannah was unpredictable, impulsive. She would have jeopardized everything. I had to protect our family's interests. You orchestrated her murder? Leo asked, his voice trembling with rage. I merely facilitated events. Calhoun was a useful pawn. Harding was easily manipulated. I simply ensured that the pieces fell into place. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the chaotic scene. And now, you've become a liability, a loose end that needs to be tied up. Olivia reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver pistol. It is a shame, really. You were a promising young detective, but sometimes sacrifices must be made. The rain continued to beat against the roof of the Blue Moon Saloon, a grim soundtrack to the unfolding drama. Leo found himself facing a new, even more dangerous adversary, a woman driven by greed, ambition, and a ruthless determination to protect her family's legacy. The Crossroads Deal was far from over, and Leo knew, with a sinking feeling, that he was now playing a game with stakes higher than ever before. The interrogation room was sterile, cold across the steel table. Olivia Reed Thefn Clara. She'd insisted on being called. Clara stiffened, didn't flinch under Leo's gaze. She'd confessed everything, a meticulously planned narrative justified by a twisted sense of familial loyalty and righteous anger. Savannah was going to expose Harding. Yes, Clara said, her voice devoid of emotion. But she was naive. She thought she could take him down on her own. He would have crushed her. I knew I had to orchestrate everything, make it undeniable, frame him with irrefutable evidence. She hadn't wanted Savannah dead. She'd wanted Harding destroyed, his network of corruption dismantled. The guitar theft, the coded message, Leo's involvement. It had all been calculated. A series of carefully placed dominoes, designed to fall in a specific order. You used Leo, he said, the bitterness still raw. You used me as a pawn. I anticipated your instincts, Maxwell, your need to see justice done. You were a tool, yes, but a valuable one. Someone with ties to the past, someone who could ask the right questions. She'd leveraged his history with the Force, his lingering guilt, to guide him precisely where she wanted him to go. Leo worked with Clara reluctantly to gather the final pieces of evidence. She revealed a hidden account containing records of Harding's illicit dealings, a digital vault filled with damning proof. Together they presented the evidence to the FBI, bypassing the compromised local authorities. The arrest of Richard Harding sent shockwaves through the city. His network of cronies crumbled, their carefully constructed facade of respectability shattered. The land deals were rescinded, the stolen funds recovered. It was a sweeping victory, but it came at a cost. Jazz Calhoun, stripped of his influence, sat sullenly in a holding cell, facing a litany of charges. The Gibson guitar was recovered from a storage unit he'd rented under an alias. Its return to the collector was a symbolic gesture, a small piece of justice in a sea of corruption. Leo was officially cleared of all charges. The fabricated evidence was exposed, his name was cleared, but the ordeal had left its mark. The weight of the past had settled on his shoulders, heavier than ever before. He stood outside the courthouse, blinking in the afternoon sun. The media frenzy had subsided, the reporters replaced by ordinary citizens going about their lives. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. He hadn't contacted Marlene Hayes since Harding's arrest. He doubted she would welcome his presence. The festival was ruined, her reputation tarnished. He didn't envy her position. More pressing was his own self-destruction. The gambling debts loomed over him, a constant reminder of his weakness. He'd nearly lost everything, not just his freedom, but his very soul. He finally admitted to himself that he couldn't do it alone. He found a local gamblers' anonymous meeting. The stale coffee and uncomfortable silence were a far cry from the smoky backrooms he'd frequented. But it was a start. He listened to others share their stories, their struggles, their battles with addiction. He recognized his own patterns in their words, the same desperate need for control, the same self-destructive impulses. Sharing his story was excruciating, but liberating. He admitted his failings, his recklessness, his inability to cope with the trauma of his past. He wasn't looking for forgiveness, just a chance to rebuild, to start over. He sold his car, liquidated his remaining assets, and paid off his debts, a small act of redemption. He found a modest apartment, a tiny space overlooking a quiet park. It wasn't much, but it was his. He visited Savannah Reed's grave, a simple headstone in a quiet cemetery. He placed a single, blue guitar string on the stone, a silent acknowledgement of her sacrifice. He didn't know if she would have approved of Clara's methods, but he hoped she could find peace knowing that justice had finally been served. He looked out at the city, its skyline a jagged silhouette against the setting sun. The weight of the strings had lifted, but the echoes of his past would always remain. He was no longer a detective, but he wasn't lost. He was evolving. He'd begun taking a part-time job teaching guitar lessons to kids at a local community center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was satisfying. He found a sense of purpose in sharing his music, in helping others find their voice. He was finally learning to live with the ghosts. Just as he was starting to believe he might find lasting peace, his phone rang. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered, "Hello." A woman's voice, calm and measured, spoke on the other end. "Mr. Maxwell, my name is Evelyn Bellwether. You were involved in the investigation involving Savannah Reed. I understand you have a history with the Chicago PD." "Yes," he replied cautiously. "My brother Jackson Bellwether was very close to Savannah. He has been troubled by her death for years. Recently, he received an anonymous package containing information about another cold case, a case your father worked on. The disappearance of Amelia Hayes, Marlene Hayes' sister." Leo's blood ran cold. Amelia Hayes had vanished in 1992, a case that had haunted his father throughout his career. It was a case that was never solved. "What information?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The package contained a photograph of your father meeting with Jasper Calhoun just weeks before Amelia disappeared. The woman paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I believe there is a connection, Mr. Maxwell, and I think your father was getting too close to the truth." Before Leo could respond, the line went dead. He stood there frozen, the weight of the strings tightening around his heart once more. The healing had been premature. The past wasn't buried, it was merely dormant, and now it was awakening. The Crossroads Deal wasn't finished. It had just begun a new chapter.